Egypt's president welcomes the two-state solution conference in New York. The Syrian president urges the U.S. to lift sanctions under the 2019 Caesar Act. The White House says that the Russian proposal on extending the nuclear arms control treaty sounds pretty good. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has welcomed the two-state solution conference in New York, calling it a historic opportunity to end decades of conflict and suffering. In his post on his official Facebook page, President el-Sisi stressed that recognizing an independent Palestinian state is not a dream, but a rightful cause for which Palestinians have long struggled, supported by peace-loving nations worldwide. He affirmed that his path remains the only way to secure lasting peace, stability, and cooperation across the region. In a breaking development right now, where Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with the Rwandan President Paul Kagame in Cairo on Tuesday, reaffirming strong bilateral ties and signing several cooperation agreements in areas including water management, housing, logistics, and investment protection. El-Sisi emphasized Egypt's support for Rwanda's Vision 2050 and its readiness to share expertise in healthcare, construction, and pharmaceuticals. He also stressed Egypt's commitment to African peace and development, especially in the Great Lakes region. On regional issues, both leaders discussed the Nile Basin cooperation and the situation in Gaza. El-Sisi reiterated Egypt's rejection of any displacement of Palestinians and called for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state along the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. The visit concluded with a joint press conference and the signing of memorandums of understanding to expand Egypt-Rwanda strategic cooperation. Egypt's Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli has stressed Egypt's four-decade pursuit of peace and stability in the Middle East, delivering Egypt's address on behalf of the President at the UN High-Level Conference on Palestine. Madbouli affirmed that no regional stability is possible without a just settlement, granting Palestinians an independent state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. The Egyptian foreign minister firmly rejected any displacement attempts, calling for them ethnic cleansing, and announced Egypt will host Gaza's reconstruction conference once a ceasefire is achieved. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced the UN conference that France now recognizes the state of Palestine. Speaking at the high-level international conference on peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine, co-chaired by France and Saudi Arabia, Macron declared, "The time has come. We can no longer wait." He emphasized the goal of achieving a two-state living in peace and security side by side. With France's recognition, more than 150 UN member states have now officially recognized Palestine. At the United Nations Summit on the Palestinian two-state solution, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas emphasized the need for a unified Palestinian state without weapons, calling on Hamas and other factions to surrender arms to the Palestinian Authority. Abbas condemned violence from both sides, including Hamas actions in 2023 and Israeli occupation crimes. He pledged to organize presidential and parliamentary elections within a year after the war ends, and to draft an interim constitution that transfer power from the authority to the state, ensuring adherence to international commitments and monitored by international observers. Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, lauded countries recognizing Palestine at a UN conference. He described the recognition as a will and responsibility to secure Palestinian self-determination and occupation. Expressing gratitude towards President Mahmoud Abbas and international partners like France, Prince Faisal stressed ongoing efforts to end Israeli aggression and promote accountability. The Saudi minister officially adjourned the conference for peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine, emphasizing that the irreversible nature of the two-state solution. We now move to a live broadcast from New York, where the world leaders gather at the United Nations for the beginning of the 80th General Assembly high-level debate.
But a practical strategy for the survival of humanity. Many of our founders had seen firsthand the hell of the death camps and the terror of war. They knew that true leadership meant creating a system to prevent a replay of those horrors, a firewall against the flames of conflict and World War III, a forum for sovereign states to pursue dialogue and cooperation, and a concrete affirmation of an essential human truth: we are all in this together. And this General Assembly Hall is the heartbeat of that truth. It is why for decades world leaders have come to this one-of-a-kind podium. It is why you are here today. Line for people in crisis, a lighthouse for human rights, and the center that transforms your decisions, the decisions of member states, into action. 80 years on, we confront again the question our founders faced, only more urgent, more intertwined, more unforgiving. What kind of world do we choose to build together? Excellencies, 80 years on, we confront again the question our founders faced, only more urgent, more intertwined, more unforgiving. What kind of world do we choose to build together? Excellencies, we have our work cut out for us, as our ability to carry out that work is being cut from us. We have entered in an age of reckless disruption and relentless human suffering. Look around. The principles of the United Nations that you have established are under siege. Listen, the pillars of peace and progress are buckling under the weight of impunity, inequality, and indifference. Sovereign nations invaded, hunger weaponized, truth, silence, rising smoke from bombed-out cities, rising anger in fractured societies, rising seas swallowing coastlines. Each one a warning, each one a question. What kind of world will we choose? A world of raw power or a world of laws? A world that is a scramble for self-interest or a world where nations come together? A world where might makes right or a world of rights for all? Excellencies, our world is becoming increasingly multipolar, and this is positive, reflecting a more diverse, dynamic global landscape. But multipolarity without effective multilateral institutions can court chaos, as Europe has learned the hard way, resulting in World War I. It was multipolar, but there was no multilateral institutions. So let's be clear. International cooperation is not naivete. It is hard-headed pragmatism. In a world where there's leap borders, isolation is an illusion. No country can stop a pandemic alone. No army can halt rising temperatures. No algorithm can rebuild trust once it is broken. These are global stress tests of our system, our solidarity, and our resolve. I'm convinced we can pass these tests, and we must. Because people everywhere are demanding something better, and we owe them a system worthy of their trust and a future worthy of their dreams. And so we must make the choice, an active choice, to reaffirm the imperative of international law, to reassert the centrality of multilateralism, to reinforce justice and human rights, and to recommit to the principles that gave rise to our organization and to the promise contained in its first words, we the peoples. Excellencies, the choices we face are not part of an ideological debate. They are a matter of life and death for millions. As I scan the global landscape, we must make 5 critical choices. First, we must choose peace rooted in international law. Peace is our first obligation. Yet today, wars rage with a barbarity we vowed never to allow. Too often, the Charter is brandished when convenient and trampled when not. But the Charter is not optional. It is our foundation. And when the foundation cracks, everything built upon fractures. Around the world, we see countries acting as if the rules don't apply to them. We see humans treated as less than human, and we must call it out. Impunity is the mother of chaos, and it has spawned some of the most atrocious conflicts of our times. In Sudan, civilians are being slaughtered, starved, and silenced. Women and girls face unspeakable violence. There is no military solution. I urge all parties, including those in this hall, end the external support that is fueling this bloodshed. Push to protect civilians, because the Sudanese people deserve peace, dignity, and hope. In Ukraine, relentless violence continues to kill civilians, destroy civilian infrastructure, and threaten global peace and security. I commend recent diplomatic efforts by the United States and others. We must work for a full ceasefire and a just, lasting peace in accordance with the Charter, UN resolutions, and international law. In Gaza, the horrors are approaching a third monstrous year. They are the result of decisions that defy basic humanity. The scale of death and destruction are beyond any other conflict in my years as Secretary General. The International Court of Justice has issued legally binding provisional measures in the case named Application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. Since then, a famine has been declared and the killing has intensified. The measures stipulated by the ICJ must be implemented fully and immediately. Nothing can justify the horrific Hamas terror attacks of October 7 and the taking of hostages, both of which I have repeatedly condemned. And nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people and the systematic destruction of Gaza. We know what is needed. Permanent ceasefire now. All the hostages released now. Full humanitarian access now. And we must not relent in the only viable answer to sustainable Middle East peace, a two-state solution as so eloquently reaffirmed yesterday. We must urgently reverse dangerous trends on the ground. Relentless settler expansion and violence and the looming threat of annexation must stop. Everywhere, from Haiti to Yemen, to Myanmar and the Sahel and beyond, we must choose peace anchored in international law. The past year has brought glimmers of hope, including the ceasefire between Cambodia and Thailand and the agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia brokered by the United States. But far too many crises continue unchecked. Impunity prevails, lawlessness is a contagion, it invites mayhem, accelerates terror, and risks a nuclear free-for-all. When accountability shrinks, graveyards grow. When UN staff and facilities are attacked, violating legal obligations, so too is the core of our ability to serve and deliver. The Security Council must live up to its responsibilities. It must be more representative, more transparent, and more effective. And beyond crisis response, we must tackle the injustices that ignite conflict: exclusion, inequality, impunity, and corruption. The surest way to silence the guns is to raise the volume for justice. Real security is born of fairness and opportunity for all.
Excellencies, this leads me to my second point. We must choose human dignity and human rights. Human rights are not an ornament of peace, they're its bedrock. Human rights, economic, social, cultural, political, and civil, are universal, indivisible, and interdependent. Choosing
Leur
rights.
forme. Protéger les défenseurs des droits humains, les journalistes et la liberté d'expression, et garantir les droits des réfugiés et des migrants afin que la mobilité soit sûre et conforme.
Confronting racism and discrimination in all its forms. Protecting human rights defenders, journalists, and freedom of speech. And upholding the rights of refugees and migrants so that mobility is safe and in accordance with international law. Human rights are a daily battle, online and offline. They require political will. But dignity is not only about the protection of rights. It is about rights fulfilled through inclusive and resilient development. Rights that put an end to poverty and hunger. Rights that open doors to education, health, and opportunity. The Sustainable Development Goals are our shared roadmap for achieving these rights. But in order to make progress down this road, we need fuel. And that fuel is finance. We've seen what development done right can deliver. In the past decade, millions more have gained access to electricity, clean cooking solutions, and to the internet. Child marriage is in retreat. Women's representation is growing, but cuts to aid are wreaking havoc. They are a death sentence for many. For so many more, a stolen future. This is the great paradox of our time. We have the solutions, but we are siphoning off the fuel that would make it possible to make progress. To choose dignity, we must choose financial justice and solidarity. We need to reform the international financial architecture so that it drives development for all. With bigger and bolder multilateral development banks, lending more and mobilizing more private capital for developing countries, with faster and fairer debt relief mechanisms, helping every country in crisis, including middle-income countries. Protecting natural resources by tackling illicit financial flows and abusive tax practices that rob societies of their future. And global financial institutions that represent today's world, with far greater participation of developing countries in terms of their composition and their decision-making. So let us choose a global economy that works for everyone, men and women. Let us choose human rights and dignity. And let us equip ourselves with the means to ensure a transition for people and the planet. Excellencies, this brings me to the third choice. We must choose climate justice. The climate crisis is accelerating, but so are the solutions. The clean energy future is no longer a distant promise. It's already here. No government, industry, or special interest can stop it. But some are trying, hurting economies, locking in higher prices, and squandering a historic opportunity.
Fossil fuels are a losing bet. Last year, almost all new power capacity came from renewables, and the investment is surging. Renewables are the cheapest and fastest source of new power. They create jobs, drive growth, shield economies from volatile oil and gas markets, connect the unconnected, and can free us from the tyranny of fossil fuels. But not at today's pace. Clean energy investment remains uneven. 21st century grids and storage are not rolling out fast enough. And public subsidies, taking from taxpayer money, still flow to fossil fuels over clean energy by a factor of 9 to 1. Meanwhile, emissions, temperatures, and disasters keep rising. And those least responsible suffer the most. Science says limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by the end of this century is still possible, but the window is closing. The International Court of Justice has affirmed the legal obligation of states. We must step up action and ambition, especially through strengthened national climate plans. Tomorrow, I will welcome leaders to announce new targets. The G20, the biggest emitters, must lead, guided by common but differentiated responsibilities. But all countries must step up and do more as we head to the UN Climate Conference in Brazil. By accelerating action in energy, forests, methane, and industrial decarbonization. By defining a credible roadmap to mobilize $1.3 trillion annually in climate finance by 2035 for developing countries. By supporting just transitions, by doubling finance for adaptation to at least $40 billion this year, and rapidly deploying proven tools to unlock billions more in concessional finance. And by capitalizing the Loss and Damage Fund with significant contributions. All of these requires government, international financial institutions, philanthropies, civil society, and the private sector to work together, to provide fiscal space to developing countries and unlock new innovative sources of finance at scale. including solidarity levies on high-emitting sectors and debt swaps. We have the solutions and tools, but we must choose climate justice and climate action. First, we must choose to put technology at the service of humanity. Artificial intelligence is rewriting human existence in real time, transforming how we learn, work, communicate, and what we can trust. And the question is not how to stop it, but how to steer it for the greater good. Technology must be our servant, not our master. It must promote human rights, human dignity, and human agency. Yet today, AI's advancement in outpacing regulation and responsibility and is concentrated in a few hands. And the risks are expanding to new frontiers, from biotech to autonomous weapons. We are witnessing the rise of tools for mass surveillance, mass social control, mass disruption, and even mass destruction. Tools that can drain energy, strain ecosystems, and intensify the race for critical minerals, potentially stoking instability and conflict. Yet, these technologies remain largely ungoverned. We need universal guardrails and common standards across platforms. No company should be above the law. No machines should decide who lives or dies. No system should be deployed without transparency, safety, and accountability. Last month, this Assembly took a historic step, establishing an independent international scientific panel on AI and an annual global dialogue on AI governance. Two new pillars of a shared architecture, connecting science with policy to bring clarity and foresight, enabling innovation to flourish while advancing our values and our rights, and ensuring governments, companies, and civil society can help shape common norms. We must build on these mechanisms and close the capacity gap. All countries must be able to design and develop AI, not just to consume it. I have proposed voluntary financing options to build AI computing power, data, and skills in developing nations. No country should be locked out of the digital future or locked into systems it cannot shape or trust. And governments must lead with vision, and companies must act with responsibility. And we, the international community, must ensure that technology lifts up humanity. So let us choose cooperation over fragmentation, ethics over expediency, and transparency over opacity. Technology will not wait for us, but we can still choose what it serves. So let us choose wisely. Fifth and finally, to meet all these goals, we must choose to strengthen the United Nations for the 21st century. The forces shaking our world are also testing the foundations of the United Nations system. We are being hit by rising geopolitical tensions and divisions, chronic uncertainty, and mounting financial strain. But those who depend on the United Nations must not be made to bear the cost, especially now, when for every dollar invested to support our core work to build peace, the world spends $750 on weapons of war. This is not only unsustainable, it is indefensible. In this moment of crisis, the United Nations has never been more essential. The world needs our unique legitimacy, our convening power, our vision to unite nations, to bridge divides and confront the challenges before us. The Pact for the Future has shown your determination to build a United Nations that is stronger, more inclusive, and more effective. That is the logic and the urgency of our UN80 initiative. We are moving swiftly and decisively. I put forward concrete proposals, a revised budget for 2026 that strengthens accountability, improves delivery, and cuts costs. Practical reforms to implement mandates more effectively and efficiently with greater impact. And ideas to spark a paradigm shift in the structure of the UN and how its parts work together. Most of these decisions rest with you, the Member States, and we will move forward in full respect of the established procedures. Together, let us choose to invest in a United Nations that adapts, innovates, and is empowered to deliver for people everywhere. Excellencies, my overriding message comes down to this. Now is the time to choose. It's not enough to know what the right choices are. I urge you to make them. I grew up in a world where choices were few. I was raised in the darkness of dictatorship, where fear silenced voices and hope was nearly crushed. Yet, even the bleakest hours, especially then, I discovered a truth that has never left me. Power does not reside in the hands of those who dominate or divide. Real power resides from people, from our shared resolve to uphold dignity, to defend equality, to believe fiercely in our common humanity and the potential of every human being. I learned early to persevere, to speak out, to refuse to surrender, no matter the challenge, no matter the obstacle, no matter the hour. We must and we will overcome. Because in a world of many choices, there is one choice we must never make, the choice to give up. We must never give up. That is my promise to you, for peace, for dignity, for justice, for humanity, for the world we know is possible when we work as one. I will never, ever give up. Thank you.
That was Antonio Guterres at the UN General Assembly giving his speech, and he talked about the establishment of the UN 80 years ago and how it was a product of World War II, genocide and mass war in general. He discussed the idea that now, 80 years on, the UN members and the world alike faces the very same questions that caused the establishment of the UN 80 years ago, which is how to build a better future based on human rights and equality. He discussed the idea of the principles of the UN being under siege and buckling under the intense impunity and lack of accountability by certain member states. He also talked about a world of raw power. He gave similes, whether we choose a world of raw power or a world of law. Also discussed whether we choose as humans the world of self-interest or a world of community and cooperation. He discussed the idea of human rights and how it is a centerpiece of what the UN is all about, and that international law is essential to maintain order in the world. He talked about 5 very important points that he sees are the crises that face humanity in general. Firstly is peace. There has to be an obligation, and that things are not going towards that path right now. He discussed about financial justice and how this is important for member states. Also talked about the advancements of AI, where it is important to somehow regulate AI and make sure that it doesn't go against human interests. He also discussed the importance of decreasing warmongering, whether it be related to geopolitical issues, including setting up a panel to discuss geopolitical uncertainties and decrease the spending of UN weapons. And he also said at the end of his speech that now is the time to choose what our future looks like. And now back to our news bulletin, where the Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara has urged the US to lift sanctions under the 2019 Caesar Act during his visit to the UN, marking the first Syrian leader at the General Assembly in nearly 60 years. He said the sanctions now hurt ordinary Syrians and hinder economic recovery. Shatar also discussed ongoing talks with Israel to stop airstrikes and troop incursions in the southern Syria, aiming to protect the Syrian sovereignty. He warned that Kurdish demands for decentralization risks wider conflict. Shatar is expected to deliver his first UN General Assembly address as the 80th session opens. The White House has said that Russia's proposal for a one-year extension of the latest nuclear arms control treaty sounds, quote, pretty good. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed that President Donald Trump is aware of Russian President Vladimir Putin's offer, but will make his own comments on it later. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we've been covering. Egypt's president welcomes the two-state solution conference in New York. The Syrian president urges the U.S. to lift sanctions under the 2019 Caesar Act. The White House says that the Russian proposal on extending the nuclear control treaty sounds pretty good. This brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EGY to stay informed. Stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews.